Europe, 1939. The continent stands on the edge of destruction, and in the middle of it all lies Luxembourg. A nation smaller than London, peaceful, neutral, and determined to stay that way. But in the storm that was coming, even neutrality would not be enough. After the end of the First World War, Luxembourg was a country trying to survive in the shadow of empires. It had been occupied by Germany during the Great War, but never destroyed. And in 1919, its peoples faced a choice: remove their monarchy or keep it. They voted overwhelmingly for Grand Duchess Charlotte, a young ruler who would soon become the symbol of their nation's resilience. Throughout the 20s and 30s, Luxembourg balanced between its powerful neighbours. These were France, Belgium and Germany. It was a small state in an incredibly dangerous neighbourhood. Economically, however, it prospered. The steel industry boomed, making Luxembourg one of the richest small nations in Europe. Politically, it clung to neutrality, hoping never to be caught again between warring powers. Unfortunately, this led to something of a metaphorical tightrope, as in 1921, Luxembourg signed an economic union with Belgium, linking their currencies and trade, yet the country also maintained close ties with Germany, whose language was widely spoken across the nation. As Adolf Hitler rose to power in the 1930s, that balance became fragile. While a few Luxembourgers admired Germany's strength, most viewed Nazism with a suspicion and fear. Under Prime Minister Pierre Dupont, the government began quietly defending its neutrality, censoring extremist propaganda, strengthening border controls, and reaffirming Luxembourg's independence in every speech. But in a world where treaties meant little and aggression meant everything, neutrality was beginning to look like a wishful thinking. When Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, Luxembourg once again declared neutrality. Bridges along the border were wired with explosives and citizens were told to stay calm. Grand Duchess Charlotte addressed the nation on the radio. Luxembourg, she said, would remain faithful to peace, but also its dignity. By early 1940, that hope was fading. German planes violated Luxembourg's airspace almost daily. Refugees began crossing the border from Belgium and France, and on the 9th of May 9th, the government met in an emergency session. The following dawn, May 10th, 1940, the German army struck. Columns of troops, tanks, and aircraft poured over the border. Luxembourg's small volunteer corps tried to resist by blowing bridges, but within hours, the roads to the capital were filled with German vehicles. The invasion lasted less than a day. Grand Duchess Charlotte and her government fled first to France, then to London and Canada, where they continued to struggle in exile. From abroad, she spoke to her people through BBC radio, her calm voice becoming the heart of a nation under occupation. Following the invasion, the Germans quickly annexed Luxembourg into the Third Reich. It was no longer a country, but merely a province of Germany. The Nazi administration banned the French language, changed street names, and forced citizens to use German. Even personal names were altered, such as Jean becoming Johann and Marie becoming Maria. Children were taught that they were not Luxembourgers, but Germans who had forgotten their roots. The occupiers had tried to erase Luxembourg's identity, but the people refused to forget who they were. Despite the danger, resistance groups emerged across the country. The Leedsburger Patriot Liga and the Luxembourgish League for Freedom organized underground newspapers, distributing banned information and helping people escape across the border. In 1942, the Nazis declared that all Luxembourgers were now German citizens and began forcing young men into the Wehrmacht. Over 12,000 were conscripted, more than 3,500 never returned. When protests erupt, the Gestapo cracked down ruthlessly, but the spirit of resistance never disappeared. Luxembourg remained defiant. In September 1944, the first American units crossed into Luxembourg. After 4 long years under German rule, liberation had finally come. Crowds filled the streets waving flags, cheering and welcoming the soldiers who had restored their freedom. For a moment, it seemed the nightmare was over, but peace would not come so easily. That winter, Adolf Hitler prepared one last desperate gamble. His plan, to smash through the Allied lines in the Ardennes, seized the port of Antwerp and split the Western Army in two. It would become known as the Battle of the Bulge, and Luxembourg once again would be caught in the middle. On the dawn of December 16, 1944, German artillery opened fire across the quiet fields of northern Luxembourg and Belgium. The sky lit up with explosions as shells rained down on the American positions. Tanks and infantry surged forward through the snow and fog. The small towns of Clerval and Wurtz were among the first to be hit. Entire villages were destroyed as the front line collapsed, to the surprise of Seoul. American units, mostly from the 28th Infantry Division, fought desperately to slow the advance, buying time for the reinforcements to arrive. Civilians fled south as fighting raged from house to house, many hid in cellars for days, without food or power as artillery thundered above them. In Clerval, US troops made a stand inside the town's medieval castle, holding out until they were overrun. Almost the entire town was burnt to the ground. Following on from this, for several weeks, northern Luxembourg was once again under German occupation. But the advance soon stalled as the 101st Airborne and Patton's 3rd Army counterattacked from the south. And by early January 1945, the German forces were pushed back across the border. Luxembourg was free once more, but at a terrible cost. More than 500 civilians had been killed. Dozens of towns lay in ruin. The snow-covered fields of the Ardennes were littered with the wreckage of tanks, homes, and ruined lives. But by the end of January, the last German troops had retreated. The Grand Duchy had endured 2 invasions, 2 occupations, and one of the deadliest battles fought on Western soil. Luxembourg was now free, but had changed forever. A third of its men had been forced to fight for the enemy, meaning thousands had died in uniform that was not even their own. The countryside was scarred by craters and wrecked armour, but the spirit of the nation had survived. When Grand Duchess Charlotte returned from exile, she was greeted by vast crowds of men, women, children, who had all endured bombings and fear, but never lost their sense of identity. Luxembourg emerged from the war determined never to be defenseless again. Neutrality, once seen as its shield, had failed, so the Grand Duchy chose a new path. It joined the United Nations in 1945, becoming a founding member of NATO in 1949, and later helped establish the European Coal and Steel Community, the foundation of today's European Union. The small nation, once trampled and forgotten, became a builder of peace and unity in Europe. Luxembourg's story is not one of vast armies or great conquests. It is a story of endurance, of a people who refused to disappear, even when their country was erased from a map. For 5 years, they lived under an empire that tried to erase their names, their flag, their languages, and yet, when war ended, Luxembourg stood tall, not because of its size, but because of its strength of spirit. A nation that had been occupied, silenced and nearly forgotten, became a voice for cooperation, democracy, and a new peace in Europe. Luxembourg's survival reminds us that history is not only written by the powerful, but those who choose to endure, rebuild, and remember. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Please remember to like and subscribe. Mainly so I can justify to buy an actual microphone and stop recording on my iPhone. Thank you, bye.